Hi kids, welcome back. Nice to see you again, and I really hope that you are all doing well and staying safe at home. Okay, today we are going to start our class on chapter 9, lesson 3, on the lesson From Ocean to Ocean on page 372. Well, we are in one of my favorite lessons, and I hope it's one of yours too. We have been seeing everything that has happened in the United States. We saw how the new settlers pushed the Native Americans to the west as they were advancing inland. Okay, so how they got the Louisiana Purchase, we saw the Lewis and Clark traveling, we saw how they expanded their borders, how they came from being on only one side of the United States. If you remember, well, let me make it a little bit bigger, how they started on the 13 colonies and how they came to get all the Louisiana Purchase, remember? So today we are going to go on to page 372, From Ocean to Ocean. Remember the dynamic? We read, I explain, you ask questions. And this time you guys are going to be having to ask your questions in the platforms, okay? So it says, from ocean to ocean, you are there. It is March 1st, 1836. You and about 100 men are at the Alamo in San Antonio. In Texas, you are defending the Alamo against the Mexican army. The cannon fire grows louder. The Mexican army has been attacking for days. You know that you will fight bravely to defend the Alamo. You only hope that you will succeed. Today's lesson is going to be something that concerns all Mexicans. Why? Because this part that we are going to be talking about belonged to Mexico one day. So now we are going to see how the United States came to have this land. Okay, so remember that history is not always fair, not for everyone. Okay, so let's see. It says Texas independence. In 1821, Mexico won its independence from Spain. Well, you should know this story already. Okay, you need to remember that Mexico was under the control of Spain for many, many years. They were in a war with Spain many years. So they won and they got their territory back. So the only thing is that if you remember, Texas is here. And Texas belonged to Mexico long time ago. So they got their territory back. So it says, Mexico took control of much of the Southwest, including Texas, because few people lived in Texas. Mexico wanted more settlers to come there. Mexico's leaders offered land in Texas to encourage settlement. Okay, so what was happening? Mexico was the owner of all this land, part of the United States. Texas is here. The central government for Mexico back in those days was all on this side, was over here. From here to here was a very long trip. So what happened is that they were afraid, Mexico's government was afraid that the Americans were going to come and settle here because nobody was living there. So what they did, they started asking people to come and live here, to come and settle here from all over the places. They wanted people to come there, to establish there. Okay, that's what they wanted. It didn't matter from wherever they were, but mostly Mexicans, of course. Now, Americans in Texas. Many of these new settlers were Americans. As more and more Americans arrived in Texas, the Mexican government became worried. Now, what do you think happened? I don't think many people from Mexico came to live here. What truly happened is many people from the United States came to live in Texas, from the United States to Texas. So Mexico said, hey, wait a minute, I don't have all these Mexicans living here. So Texas is full of Americans. So they started saying, hey, stop, we need to stop this. We don't need more Americans there because they are going to stay with our land. So in 1830, it tried to stop further American settlement. It also raised taxes on Americans already living there. So they said, okay, the government came and told all the Americans living here, if you want to stay and live here, you have to pay more taxes to us. What was the purpose? They wanted the Americans to get their things and go back to the United States. But instead, Americans already living here said, hey, wait, we helped you settle this place, and now you want to push us out of this land? No, that's not going to happen. So they got very angry. When General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna sent troops to Texas to enforce Mexican laws, fighting broke out. Why? The government sent the army, and of course they were not very happy with this, so they started fighting. A war began. Santa Anna had made himself a dictator. A dictator is a leader who has complete control of the government. Everybody had to do whatever he said, whatever Santa Anna said. Okay, so everybody had to follow his rules. So many people, many Americans that were living here went against Santa Anna. The Alamo. A group of Texans and their supporters turned the Alamo, the San Antonio de Valero mission, into a fort. Famous pioneer Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie were among the Americans of the Alamo. Santa Anna and his army attacked on February 23, 1836. The Alamo defenders held off his army for 13 days. So that means that for 13 days they were fighting. There was a war there. On March 6, the Mexicans won the battle. All but a few of the defenders had died. While the defenders fought at the Alamo, Texan leaders declared Texas an independent republic. They formed an army led by Sam Houston. So, Mexicans won the first battle. But of course, Americans were not going to let it go. So they formed another army led by Sam Houston. If you see the map on 373, you will see a green side that is the Republic of Texas. That side belonged to the United States. The orange part was the one that were being disputed. That is a part that was Mexico fighting for. So he was not going to let it go very easily. Let's go on to the next page, page 374. The Lone Star Republic. Texans did not give up after the Alamo. On April 21, the Texas Army attacked Santa Anna at San Jacinto. The Texans surprised the Mexicans and attacked, shouting, "Remember the Alamo!" After a brief battle, they captured many soldiers, including General Santa Anna. In return for his freedom, Santa Anna granted Texas independence. Sam Houston was elected the new nation's first president. Texas was called the Lone Star Republic because its flag had one star. Texas was an independent republic until it was annexed or added on by the United States in 1845. So what happened? Another battle came to Texas, but now this time Americans won and they captured Santa Anna. So he wanted to be free. He didn't want to stay in jail. So he said, okay. If you set me free, all of Texas belongs to you. So what do you think they did? Okay, you may go, bye-bye. But now Texas belongs to the United States. So now no more fighting over this land. And now this land belonged to the United States. Okay, so that's how it was called. Sam Houston became the first president, and since the flag that they had used in Texas had only one star, it was called the Only Star Republic until they decided to get Texas as a state for the United States. Okay, so trails west. Americans were always looking west for more land and new opportunities. The Oregon Country in the Pacific Northwest was one place that attracted settlers. You need to remember, they already had the Louisiana Purchase. Now they have all the east, the Appalachian Mountains, and part of the plains. They haven't been all the way to the Rocky Mountains yet. Okay, so they want more and more and more lands. Remember, they only started with 13 colonies. Look where they are now. All the way. Okay, so I don't think they're going to stop there. It says, the Oregon Country in the Pacific Northwest was one place that attracted settlers, the Oregon Trail. Among the first Americans to travel to the Oregon Country were missionaries Marcus and Narcissa Whitman. In letters to her family, Narcissa Whitman described the beautiful valleys and rich soil of the Oregon Country. Her letters were later published, and within a few years, thousands of pioneers were following the Oregon Trail west. The Oregon Trail began in Missouri at Independence. Most pioneers traveled in covered wagons. The wagons were long and shaped like boats, so people called them prairie schooners. The pioneers traveled west as part of a group of wagons called a wagon train. No one wanted to travel in winter for fear of deadly mountain snowstorms. Since it took about 6 months to travel to the Oregon Country, wagon trains left in the spring. The way west was filled with hardships. People walked most of the way because the wagons were filled with supplies. At night, wagons were pulled into a circle for protection. Wagons faced danger when they had to ford or cross rivers. If a wagon tipped over, goods could be lost or people could drown. Now, where they want to go is on this corner of the United States. Okay, that's where they want to go. So it took 6 months for them to cross from Missouri all the way to the Oregon Trail. That's where they wanted to go. So as you can see on page 375, there you have the picture of a wagon. And don't think that people would travel inside the wagons. No, the wagons would be full of supplies and people would be walking next to the wagons. So they walked for 6 months. Can you imagine that? That would be a very long trip. But probably something really good for them was on the other side. So many of them just left with all their family, got their things, and they started heading to the Oregon Trail. The Mormon Trail. In the 1840s, the Mormons, or members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, were not welcome in many places in the United States. They went west to form their own communities and to find greater religious freedom. Remember, the England people came running from the king, remember? Because the king told them that they had to follow his rules. They had to belong to the Church of England. So many people did not want to do it. So they came running from that. And that's how they started their first colony in the United States. The same thing is happening to these Mormons. They are not welcomed in many states. Not many people accept their religion. So what happens is they have to move west to another part of the country where there's not many settlers or not many Americans that are going to judge them. So they got all their people and they started moving to west to another state. Okay. Brigham Young was a Mormon leader. In 1846, he led a group of 1,000-mile trip from Illinois to the Great Salt Lake Valley. We are talking about this, okay? This is what they did. That's the long way they did, 1,000 miles. In what is now Utah. This route became known as the Mormon Trail. The Mormons created a city in the valley. The region known as the Utah Territory grew quickly. Brigham Young became the territory's first governor. So what happened in Utah, up till now, many people, if not all, they belong to this religion. Because they knew if you lived in any other state and you were a Mormon, you could come to Utah and you would be free. You would be welcomed as a Mormon. So still now, many Mormons live in Utah, okay? Expanding borders. It says, in the 1840s, both the United States and Britain claimed the Oregon Country. However, many people in the United States believed that their country had a right to the land. They believed in manifest destiny, the idea that the United States was meant to stretch from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. Many Americans wanted to see the United States expanded its borders, even if it meant going to war. Now, do you guys remember when we talked about the Native Americans living on the east, where the 13 colonies were built first? Well, what was the thinking of Native Americans? Well, they said land belongs to whoever works for it. So it was not a problem for them to share the land with the newcomers. They teach them how to grow crops, hunt, survive the long winters. Remember that? Well, now they started here, and now they want to get from ocean to ocean, from the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. They said that the United States was meant to have all this land. They didn't even know how to grow crops, how to survive the long winter. And now they say that the United States was meant to grow from ocean to ocean. Well, that's their thinking, okay? So, new conflicts. For a time, it looked like arguments over the Oregon Country might cause another war between Britain and the United States. However, in 1846, the countries settled their differences peacefully and signed a treaty that set region's northern border. 2 years later, Congress created the Oregon Country, the Oregon Territory. Many Americans also wanted California to be part of the United States. James Polk, the President of the United States at the time, was a strong supporter of manifest destiny. He offered to buy California and what is now Arizona and New Mexico for $30 million. Mexico refused to sell the land. You need to know California, Arizona, and New Mexico belonged to Mexico. But now the United States wants to buy it for $30 million. Mexico said no. The Mexican-American War. At about the same time, a dispute arose over the border between Texas and Mexico again. The United States claimed the border to the Rio Grande. Mexico said it was the Nueces River about 100 miles north at the Rio Grande. When President Polk sent General Zachary Taylor and 3,500 soldiers to the area between the Nueces and the Rio Grande, Mexican troops attacked them at Palo Alto. The United States declared war on Mexico on May 13, 1846. In 1847, American forces captured the city of Veracruz. From there, they marched to Mexico's capital, Mexico City. The Mexican troops fought bravely, but were defeated on September 14, 1847. After more than a year of fighting, the Mexican-American War was over. This is something very important. The United States sent people to Veracruz, and from there, 3,500 soldiers came to Mexico City and captured El Castillo de Chapultepec. Now, it is very famous. Every 14th of September, we celebrate El Día de los Niños Héroes. That was a war that they were fighting against America when these 13 students in the military base died. They were only kids, okay? And the United States became so happy because they had defeated Mexico. So they defeated Mexico, the war ended, and this part of Mexico became part of the United States. So that is something that you can relate. New borders. In February 1848, the United States and Mexico signed a treaty that officially ended the war. In the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, Mexico gave up all of its claims to southern Texas. Later, both governments recognized the Rio Grande as a southern border of Texas. Mexico also sold the United States a large area known as the Mexican Cession. A cession or concession is something given up. The Mexican Cession included all of present-day California, Nevada, Utah, and parts of what are now New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and Wyoming. In return, the United States paid Mexico $15 million. Remember, the United States was offering $30 million? Well, now they lost the war, they lost many soldiers, and they sold this part of the land for $15 million. Half of the price that the United States had offered. Can you imagine that? No. In 1853, the United States bought the rest of New Mexico and Arizona from Mexico in what was called the Gadsden Purchase. And that's how Mexico lost all this land. Now, let's go to the next page, page 378, the California Gold Rush. Just now, California belongs to the United States. In the 1840s, California was a land of large ranches with few small towns. However, the discovery of gold in 1848 changed the region forever. The 49ers. In 1848, James Marshall and some other workers were building a sawmill for John Sutter along the bank of the South Fork of the American River. On January 24, the workers found a small nugget of gold, a small little rock of gold. No one is sure who found it, but Marshall said that he had found it. The workers found more gold, and the news of their discovery spread. It soon caused a gold rush, or a sudden rush of people to an area where gold was being found. During the next year, about 90,000 people rushed to California. They were called 49ers because most arrived in 1849. Among the 49ers were women and as many as 1,000 African Americans, both free and enslaved. Most of the 49ers came from other parts of the United States. Some made their way west along the overland trails. Others reached California by sailing around the tip of South America or by crossing the Isthmus of Panama and then sailing up the Pacific coast. Many of the 49ers who came to California were from other parts of the world, including Mexico, South America, Europe, and Asia. In fact, about 1 of every 4 newcomers was Chinese. So, look at the importance of this land here. This is California. One person found a golden nugget in the river and said, "Hey, I found gold!" That was big news for everyone. So people from all around the United States and the world, including Mexico, started coming to California because they said gold was all over the rivers. They had a lot of gold, but not as many for all these, how many? 90,000 people. 90,000 people coming to California. Do you think all these 90,000 people could have gold? Oh, I found gold. Oh, no, just a few. Changing California. The gold rush brought great changes to California. Those who did not find gold often stayed and turned to ranching or farming. Others started businesses. By the end of 1849, California's population had grown to more than 100,000 people. A group of California leaders decided that California should become a state. After some debate, Congress agreed. In 1850, California became the 31st state. Well, if you have any questions, make sure you write it in the platform and I will answer your questions gladly. See you next time. Bye.